Again, this is the weekly Next Practices call from I4CP. If you're not familiar with us, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that truly drive high performance. We do this through our research studies, where we look at revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction to really tease out the high-performing organizations and what they do different from their low-performing counterparts, whether it's topics like performance management, DE&I, learning and development, wide range of subjects. We really cover everything in the human resources space. Again, if you're not familiar with I4CP, we are a member-driven organization, so a special welcome to everyone on the call today who's with one of our several hundred member companies. You see here just a small sampling of member logos. They range from really large organizations to maybe some that you're a little less familiar with, also spanning across really all industry markets, all industry verticals. Great to see the membership numbers climbing over time, and the diversity of different companies and organizations, not just for-profit companies either. We've got government sectors, nonprofits, NGOs as members as well. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and today I want to welcome our co-host Bethany Vogel, our community program manager. Welcome, Bethany.
Hi, Tom. Thanks. I'm really excited to be here today.
Good to have you with us. You've got a great background in learning and development, and that's going to be largely the focus of our talk today with our special guest, who we'll introduce in just a moment. But first, a couple of other quick reminders. As I said, this is the Next Practices weekly call, so we do meet every Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific. You see some of the great guests that we'll have coming up on a range of different topics, from talent acquisition, well-being, and more. We've got folks, HR leaders from Vertex Pharmaceuticals, from Target, from Dutch Bros. Great guests coming up. Also want to note that we do hold a major in-person event every year, a conference in March of each year. We just had our largest one ever in March of 2023 in Scottsdale, Arizona. We'll be back at that same venue again in 2024. You see the dates there. Registration is now open. There's always a few folks that register at the event for the subsequent year's conference because they got so much value from it. But broader registration is now open through our website. You can go to i4cp.com/conference. And thank you to Zeta for putting that link for folks over in the chat. So if you're already making your travel plans for HR events in the new year, by all means, consider joining us. We haven't announced any of the speakers for that event yet, but that information will start trickling out very soon. And so with that, I want to welcome our special guest, and I'm going to turn things over to Bethany to introduce Teri Hart.
All right. Well, great. Thank you so much. Very excited to have a conversation with you, Teri. And you know what? I'm actually going to hand it off to you and let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your career journey in L&D and HR, and tell us a little bit more about Zurich as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bethany. And thanks, Tom, for the great intro. And thanks for playing that awesome song at the beginning. It's actually one of my favorites. It's just a natural workout song because it says, "My body tells me no, but I won't quit." And so I love that. I love that for a workout song. So like many people on the call, I've been in training and development quite a while. I actually began my career while I was in college. I had the opportunity to sort of be involved in a POS, a point of sale system rollout. And literally I was in a temp job, and I think everything after that was history, because I might have strayed away from training and development at times very early in my career. I ended up always gravitating to it because it was something that I felt really passionate about. And then also just decided to sort of double down on it at some point and go back to school and get my master's degree and all that. So currently I'm head of talent development for Zurich North America. And prior to the role that I'm in now, I led L&D at Discover. I also led a design team that was responsible for designing all the training and development for CARD at Discover. And I also spent some time, great experience at McKinsey learning, leading a design team there. And then, spent some time in the medical device sector at GE Healthcare and Abbott. So I've kind of had an opportunity to work in different industries and really grow my sort of leadership development and design savvy. Zurich, by the way, just a little bit about Zurich, and I don't know if you want to share some of the slides, but a lot of people, don't know about Zurich, and so I'd love to share just a little bit about that. It's a global insurer, one of the older companies that I've worked for, although many of the companies I worked for are over 100 years old. This one's over 150 years old, and in the U.S. we operate Zurich North America, which is strictly commercial, but actually contributes about $2 billion to the 6.5 billion of business operating profit. So really almost a third of the business operating profit for Zurich Group comes from Zurich North America. And we also operate farmers exchanges, which many of you know what that is. That's a little bit more of a household name, but obviously there's, we're multinational, and you can skip ahead. Actually, there's here's a little bit about our results. Companies that choose Zurich actually choose us because we have a lot of expertise. We're the premier risk partner for our customers in Zurich North America. Because of that, I think you could see how learning would have like a really critical role in helping drive that business strategy. And you can see the different lines of business that we support. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we're really supporting larger businesses with property and casualty and comp, and things like that. But we also have life, accident, and health. That is a sector of our business that's growing. And I went wine tasting last weekend, and I was telling a lot of the vineyards that I work for a company that sells crop insurance because they've actually, some of them have used their crop insurance, and they all have crop insurance. So as I said, all over the world, you can kind of see where all of our locations are. Quite large, and very interesting to work for this company.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always love hearing how people get into training and development or learning and development, because we all end up falling into it, and it just ends up being such a natural fit. And so really neat to hear that you continue to gravitate towards that and are really in an awesome company. So moving to this next piece, I know at Zurich you're taking a broader view on what you're calling sustainability. Can you tell us a little bit more about that initiative?
Yeah, so I mean, I think many of us have had conversations about ESG in our organization, and one of the things that I've been connected to, and part of my work is really fleshing out, what does the S mean? And what does that mean in terms of what we're trying to drive in our organization in terms of people sustainability? What is that? And luckily, I mean, I think it's really great opportunity. Zurich is a strategic partner with the World Economic Forum. And we're also one of 14 members of the Good Work Alliance. So just a handful of companies, 14 companies that are part of this alliance. And really this alliance is in place to reinvent work. And I just think that's so cool. The intent is to foster a more resilient, a more equitable, a more inclusive, and really just a more human-centric future of work. And so you can see, just looking at all these practices, these all involve HR practices. These are all people practices. And so if you think about, for example, fairness and social justice, that is about looking at pay and compensation in an organization. It could be about how do you look at talent pipelines and where do you draw your early career talent, for example. And then also just, your location. One of the things I just having worked at Discover, I keep an eye on them, and they opened a call center on the South Side. And so just a really fantastic example of a really solid people sustainability practice where you're looking at the broader view of the communities that you're operating in and promoting social justice and equity. And so one of the things that we did at Zurich was we built out a strategy around this entire framework. And we asked ourselves, like, if we were doing all these things well, what would that look like? And we actually set an internal hiring goal of 75%. So that is our sort of key goal or key KPI that all of our HR work is connected to at this time. And so understanding, like, okay, if we were filling all of our roles 75% internally, it seems, when you just look at that on the surface, it seems very impossible, right? But something to share is that we're not including, by the way, our entry level talent in that. And so if we bring on apprentices and early career talent, that's not included, because obviously you're not going to hire somebody at the lowest level in your organization internally. So you can't count that group. So it's a long play. It is really a long play around how do we create new pipelines of talent? How do we take a broader view of how we're trying to support our communities and support equity? And so this internal metric is actually really exciting to me because it is a long play. And it means doing things that we really want to do in terms of learning and helps us shift from this very short-term mentality to what are we actually building in the organization to create the ability for employees to continually skill themselves and continually learn and continually grow and adjust and change as the business changes.
I want to just jump in real quick here, if I could. Two things. One, just to let everyone know that please have the chat open and use that to ask any questions of Teri today. I know some of you joined the call a few minutes late and may not have heard that message earlier. So please have the chat open for that purpose. But also, I just want to commend you, Teri, as I noted in the chat, 75%. That is much higher than most organizations achieve and even higher than most aspire to. You make a great point that the lowest level, entry level jobs aren't a part of that, rightfully so. But for all the rest of the organization, that is a very high goal. We get asked a lot in our expert network where our members can ask questions of each other and get responses from their peers, and just otherwise at I4CP, being a research firm, we get asked a lot, like, what is the target? What should we have as an internal hiring goal? What should our internal versus external goal be? And oftentimes what we hear from companies is, they're at 20% or 30% or even lower than that, and they're aspiring to be at 20% internal hires. So for you to have as your goal 75% is really impressive.
Yeah, I'm really curious, why so high? Why is that so important?
So a couple of things. It's really the internal hiring goal, and Tom, you just brought up some companies might have a goal of 20%. I mean, it really depends on your business strategy, right? And your HR strategy. And so I know I actually teach HR strategy at Marquette University, and I have a business case, that we use. It's actually a Kellogg business case around enterprise car rental. And so something in the business case is they actually have a lot of turnover with the early career talent that they bring in, but it's very intentional. And so sometimes you have intentional turnover and intentional churn. So really it is important to kind of look at the business strategy, and, we leave early career talent out. Obviously we can't hire entry-level talent internally. But that for us is part of our business strategy of growing this external talent and creating, a diverse group of employees by building and creating opportunities for these individuals to grow and thrive or go elsewhere. And so it's part of our strategy that we are a net exporter of talent, right? So we think of ourselves as we're a talent builder, not a talent buyer. And so I think thinking through all of that is actually really important. So it's great to benchmark and get some numbers from some other companies, but what is it that you're intending to do? And I mentioned earlier on the call, we intend to be the premier risk partner. And for us, that means building expertise. And by the way, a lot of insurers, a lot of commercial insurers want to hire underwriters from Zurich. So we actually do have, a challenge to retain our employees, but also a lot of people who leave do come back. And that is, part of the whole strategy that we have to think about. How do we create a place where people want to stay and people have a sense of well-being? We think about, if you start thinking about what does a 75% rate mean, it also means thinking about that. I'm getting feedback. Means thinking about that whole life cycle. If employees leave, how are you offboarding them? How are you staying connected to them? How are we welcoming them back? So I think it depends, but we're building expertise. And we're building that connection. And so I think building that internally makes a lot of sense, but if people leave and come back and bring some new expertise in, that's okay too. So I think that answered the question, but it does depend on business strategy.
We did have one question from the chat from Karen. Can you share how you balance that internal hiring goal with diversity and inclusion? I assume part of that answer might be that since you're not including the entry level positions as part of that goal, if you've got a very strong, diverse base, then you very much could meet both goals by focusing on upskilling, reskilling, development up the pipeline.
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, because that's really the key challenge with an internal hiring metric. But here's the thing, and I was so when I was at Discover, Discover was a member of the Financial Services Pipeline, which is an alliance of area banks, so Chicago area banks, and their goal is to increase the diverse representation, and particularly people of color, Latino, and African American in Chicago financial services industry. And, I had an opportunity to look at a report from Mercer while I was there on, 20 years of work and the results of 20 years of work of trying to increase representation in the financial services industry. And, I'm probably, I don't want to overly reduce what I gleaned from this amazing, very thorough report. But one of the takeaways for me was that people tend to just poach the talent, and they're actually not increasing the number of diverse individuals. And so, if you're not increasing the number of diverse individuals in the market, you're just poaching talent from other companies, and you're not actually building equity. You're not building, you're not actually creating any diversity. And so to do that, it is a little bit of a long play, and it is about doing things like Discover as we're locating their facilities. Hybrid work opens up your markets a little bit better and enables you to have more diverse individuals that you're bringing in. So we still absolutely are looking at this, and we still think of this as very important, but we're making some really long plays too. Our apprentice network is very much focused on bringing in diverse pipelines. We've gone to geographical areas and have partnered with schools in Atlanta and New York, where we're really looking at how are we introducing individuals to the financial services and insurance industry who may not have been exposed to that in the past, and providing really fantastic opportunities to get an education for free while working and getting paid. And so we've been really, really successful so far in our early attempts at doing that. And certainly it'll be years before many of those individuals grow with our company. But I think thinking of that long term is really critical, because we're growing talent and creating, I think, really creating equity and diversity that way.
Yeah, yeah. You're really looking towards those big goals, and in order to meet those big goals, it also sounds like you're looking at the strategy of like, okay, how are we going to get there? And one of those key things is having a learning culture, which I know is very important at Zurich North America. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of those key aspects of a learning culture?
Yeah, no, great. I love this. So, I mean, I feel like every day I'm like, pinch me, is this really my job? Because I love myself, I love learning. I've always been interested in learning. And so the idea of really being able to spend a lot of my time promoting learning and thinking about how to create systems and enablers that help people learn, grow, and thrive in their careers is just really exciting to me. And by the way, I've been excited about this for a really long time, but it wasn't until I've been working at Zurich that I actually had, sort of the CEO talking about it. Because I found one of the things I learned in my earlier experiences was it just wasn't enough for me to be the one that wanted to create a learning culture. So, heading up L&D, and trying to drive a learning culture from L&D, like that doesn't happen. You really actually need it to come from the leadership, from the CEO. In this case, we're signed on to that good work framework. And one of the aspects of that is growing a learning culture. And so now, and this is, 2023, my CEO is actually asking questions like, what are we doing to drive the 70 and the 70-20-10 model? My CEO is asking that question. So he wants to know, what are we doing to drive learning and drive a learning culture? And so I thought I would just share, just to set some context. And even though I know you can't do this from L&D, I actually, this was before our CEO had started. He actually started at the beginning of he started in 2021. It was not his focus to talk about learning culture then. He was doing a lot of other work, but we started to actually look at what's some low-hanging fruit around a learning culture. Like, what would it look like if we had a learning culture? And I worked with a group of leaders in the organization to identify some opportunities. And one of the things that we did, one of the first things that we did beginning of 2021 is we set a development goal. And so all the individual contributors in our organization, 10% of their performance is a development goal. And so now we don't push that goal. And so we've had about 65% uptake on that goal. And it's something that we're continuing to drive visibility of and continuing to increase the uptake of. But that's part of people's performance. So that that actually was some fairly low-hanging fruit, because we were doing some other work and we had an opportunity to include that and start driving that. Another thing that we did was we initiated a new award for learning. So it's up to $3,000 that individuals can get for getting a certification or completing a program of some kind, or building a new capability or a new skill. And the amount just depends on, really the value that it has to the organization. Some of the industry specific designations are the ones that, like a actuarial designation would be something that would gain that higher number. And so those do need to be business specific. And then we started credentialing. So we built a credentialing approach and put some governance around it. We're continuing to evolve that. And then I think one of the other things that's been really successful is just our partnership with the ERGs, who are actually all the time driving learning in the organization. And through our partnership, we've been able to steer that a little bit. And really, I think also come up with some really innovative and creative ideas around learning. In fact, one of our ERGs actually came up with something that we call power pods, which is a way of turning our learning journeys on power skills into social learning experiences as well. And so that was something that we came up with in partnering with our ERGs. So we have a lot of metrics that we've been tracking around some of these things, and we've been able to demonstrate success on these things. And and I think one other thing I want to just mention about the goal, managers also have a goal. 25% of managers' goals are around being a manager, and the manager framework is performance, engagement, and development. And so development's a piece of that. And so managers are expected to be able to demonstrate how they're developing their team as part of the performance. And the leadership team has a similar goal, 25% of their performance based on how they're building skills and capabilities in the organization, as well as building diverse teams and things like that. So really great opportunities to sort of really get started with building a learning culture.
There's a couple of questions that have come in through the chat here. Kirsten is wondering, she'd love to hear more about the ways you partner with the ERGs. How do you operationalize that so it becomes a sort of a habitual practice rather than something that you need to, remind yourselves to go back and engage with those groups?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we haven't operationalized it yet. So we're actually working on that right now with our head of DIEB, who, by the way, she started about 1.5 years ago, and she's been, I think, bringing in a lot of professionalism into how we think about our partnerships with the ERGs. I would say it's kind of been a little ad hoc. And lucky.
Yeah.
And so
that's fair.
It's a great question, Kirsten. I wish I could say that we were being more intentional about it. It is our plan to be more intentional about it. I think what's great is, the ERGs are always, they're naturally inclined to drive learning. And sometimes that learning is consistent with what you're trying to drive in terms of building skills and capabilities in the organization. And sometimes it's not. And so to the extent that we've, what's been great is I think a lot of my team members are involved in ERGs and heavily involved in ERGs, and the ERGs have approached us to ask for help. And so we've just been able to provide ideas and like I said, steer things to more directionally where they would help us drive some of the outcomes we're trying to drive in the organization selfishly. But I do think there's opportunity to create more of a grounded approach in how we engage with the ERGs around learning, because if everybody gets too excited about driving learning, it actually can be kind of confusing, right? And so how do you align around the kinds of capabilities you're trying to drive in the organization, and also make sure that people are, creating a whole bunch of different
a lot of great things. A lot of great things in organizations start ad hoc. You've got energy, you've got all stars that are doing interesting things, but then at some point the decentralized versus centralized questions come up. You do want alignment and consistency. So sounds like you're moving in that direction. The other chat question I wanted to raise was from Patty. She said, regarding the development goals, is it expected that these goals would be sort of short-term within a year goals, or can they be longer term, span multiple years? And how is the achievement of the goal actually assessed?
Yeah. So, and this is something, I think one of the great things is I operate in a conservative, insurance organization, right? And so one of the interesting things has been, well, let's just try it and let's figure it out later. So we've been very experimental in our approach. And I'll talk a little bit at the end of the, towards the end of this call, like something that we're piloting right now, which is, to be honest, a lot of trust me, let's just try this to keep, and it's been great because we've been kind of pushing the needle forward and getting results through an experimental approach in a very risk-averse organization, which, by the way, that's changing. I think it's evolving and it's changing, and we're becoming, we're trying to drive more innovation and more skills. And so how do we role model that for the rest of the organization? And so the development goal, we actually put that out there without like, here's some examples of how you can achieve it, and just put it out there without answering all the questions first and baking the whole thing and understanding how are we going to do that, measure this, and how are we going to do this. And so a lot of what we're doing is, let's not feel like we need to boil the ocean before we roll it out. Otherwise, we're never going to roll anything out. And so we actually role model this, just keep stepping forward mentality. And so we rolled out the development goal. And by the way, it was just like last minute, like, let's roll this out. And we were very lucky that we had uptake and agreement with the EXCO on this, and we rolled it out. And we were very lucky in the first year that we rolled it out, we had about 50% of the people get it on their goals. So that was just, good communication and good leadership too. I think just communicating that. But in terms of like how it's measured, that we still have work to do, and we're still aligning on that, and we're still honestly working on getting everybody to get it on their goals. But it's become something that is, part of our alignment conversations in terms of how people are building skills in their role in particular. And so as jobs change and evolve, and technical skills, for example, become increasingly important in, say, finance, that's something that a lot of the leaders are focused on in their alignment conversations and in their talent conversations with their team. And so we're emphasizing that in talent conversations, but still a lot more work to do and driving a common understanding around what that means. We did actually do some analysis around the connection of having that goal and the performance of that goal in relation to other goals. I don't know that you can say that much from it. There were, a higher percentage of people who had those goals and did well with the performance, with the learning goal, also tended to have, if somebody had an exceeds on their learning goal, they were more likely to have an exceeds overall. But I don't know that you can draw too many conclusions from that. But I think continuing to do that analysis and learn is helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. Something that I continue to hear this theme is you're looking at this from a very holistic perspective. Oftentimes, I think L&D or training and development can get stuck in a silo, and you are really going out there and connecting to lots of different pieces in the organization. Another thing that you mentioned was role modeling. And I know, I4CP has found obviously a learning culture is part of a healthy culture. But one of the key pieces in a learning culture is having leaders involved as teachers. And I believe that's something that you are doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about leaders as teachers and role modeling there?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's kind of like what happens when you have a lot of constraints and you're trying to make leadership programs happen. I had spent some time at McKinsey Learning where partners are expected to contribute to the learning as part of their work all the time. And so, and by the way, I think that's why, sort of our CEO, Christoph Teri, kind of brings that thinking in, having spent some time at McKinsey, that responsibility of sharing and helping others learn. I think it's actually fantastic at Zurich, the leaders just really involving themselves in our leadership programs. They involve themselves in a couple of different ways. They will speak at our commencement ceremonies. We have formal sort of graduations from our programs, and they speak at those. They also facilitate specific sessions. So one of the new programs that we have somebody internally facilitating a finance session. And so we're continuing to bring in expertise internally, whatever we can, to share and teach and enable others to learn from leaders in the organization. And then I would say just the other thing that they're doing is they're participating in a lot of the different activities we have, whether it be participating on a panel, participating in a video that we might be using to highlight learning in the organization. It's very infrequent that one of our leaders says no to and ask, like recording a video or participating on a panel or whatnot. And then I think, over the last couple of years, and again, with the CEO leading this charge on learning, we've been having a lot of leaders in the organization, a lot of the business unit leaders sponsoring learning in their organization. And so, for example, our head of claims recently sponsored a learning day. Huge commitment for the largest, one of the largest business units in our organization. And to actually just say, we're going to take a day every quarter and spend it on learning. And similarly, the head of our Canada business unit actually announced that he was going to be spending time learning. So I think just our leadership does a really fantastic job of role modeling learning and really dedicating time to learn. And this is, by the way, part of our strategy. And Bethany, I like what you said about how we're taking that broader view, because learning is tied to all the talent practices. And if we don't think of our jobs as how are we integrating learning into all of our talent practices, and we're just sort of rolling out our training programs, then we're missing some opportunities to really deepen that sense that learning is really the crux of growing skills in the organization. And so you can see, like, talent practices, these are things that we're starting to think about. How do we position ourselves so that a new employee coming to this organization sees, like, learning is what we do. Learning is what's happening here. By the way, our employee value proposition is let's grow together. So it's all about learning. We're looking at how do we help people understand what behavioral interviewing questions they can ask around learning agility. We certainly have already have interview questions like many of you do. And so how can we integrate some there? So really exciting work to start taking a broad view. And it takes a lot of partnership with your peers in HR as well as the business to really be able to make this happen.
Well, certainly love that EVP of Let's Grow Together. That's certainly putting L&D at the forefront of something critical. As Bethany said, involving leaders as teachers is a key part of learning culture, and learning culture is a key part of your broader organizational culture. In fact, multiple I4CP studies over the years have found that involving your leaders as teachers is what we call a next practice, something that high-performing organizations do more than low performers, but that still isn't widely adopted. So again, kudos to you for doing so, and you're getting a lot of kudos and comments from folks in the chat on that. Speaking of which, I wanted to surface one more question from the chat. It was Diane a little while ago that asked on the slide that's currently showing there on the top left, personalize my development experience. She was just wondering what you use there in terms of either technology or off the shelf versus in-house content. And similarly, I had a question on the previous slide around the badging, the credentialing, if you use Credly or some other platform for that. So just give us a sense for maybe some of the partners and technology used to enable all of this.
Yeah. So we are using Credly. So I think that's an easy one, and we've integrated that with My Development, which is actually cross knowledge, which is it's a learner experience platform, and I think long term we actually have a long term view around probably moving this from cross knowledge to another program. I think it's good with some things, maybe not so good with others, but personalized My Development experience means that really the My Development front page is customized based on the learner. And so as a learner goes into that entry page, my development's able to say, oh, this person is in HR in this role, and here's some suggestions that we would make for that person based on that. And so we know that we've had a group in our underwriting group do that successfully for recognizing the line of business that the person is in, and customizing the options that way. So a person who's in, say, construction is getting specific training for that line of business when they go in. And so that's our underwriting university has done that already. And so we're looking, how can we do that on the front page? And so that it's not once they get into that underwriting university channel, but right away when they enter. And so if they are an underwriter, maybe that underwriting university is front and center. Whereas if they're in claims, that claims is university is front and center. So it's really helping steer the learner to the content that's most relevant to them.
Yep. And that relevancy piece is so key. And actually kind of moving on to this next page, when we're talking about skills and a skills-based approach, which is highly relevant to our learners. This is something that you're actually looking at a lot of different talent processes, and kind of going to that piece earlier that you were talking about of like, let's test and learn. You're piloting a program right now. Can you tell us more about what that pilot is?
Yeah, well, and I think just taking a step back too, I mean, when you think about skills-based HR and skills-based approach, it is really important to think about what are your key people challenges that you're trying to meet, and then how is skills going to address that? And so, it's interesting because this is one of the sort of my big ahas from all the conversations we've had about skills in the last couple of years. We tend to, it's not a one size fits all approach. Every company has a different situation. And so I know there actually is a Harvard Business Review case on IBM skills first hiring, which is fantastic and demonstrates some fantastic work where they went all in on hiring for skills because of an imminent labor shortage in the tech fields, in the tech field that they're hiring for. And it's just a critical part of their business practice or business strategy to be able to have a steady stream of programmers and consultants to run their business. And so that's, so there's different needs that you have. And our need is, how do we provide ongoing internal career mobility and growth? And so if you think about that 75% internal hiring rate, and the fact that, by the way, our business is always changing. If you think about the insurance industry, it doesn't seem like you would need to be that innovative, but we have cyber, insurance. And if you think about crop insurance and what's happening with global climate change, and there's just so much change in the industry. You think about workers' comp, we have the capability, by the way, to put sensors on people's bodies while they're working to be able to see what the risk of injury is. So the field is just very innovative, and in order to be experts, we need to be able to learn. And so thinking back to some of the things I said earlier in the call, and about our business strategy, and about what we aim to achieve, and about how we're trying to build expertise, our model of sustainability means developing meaningful careers and meaningful development opportunities so that employees stay and that they're continuing to grow. And this helps us understand, develop the right talent pools in the organization, be able to identify those talent pools. It helps us, develop a mechanism for growing capability within the organization, but it's also obviously a retention move as well, if we can create meaningful career movement for people. And so, we've developed an approach and a system, and I know we have a tool that we're rolling out, but it was important to our group that was thinking about this, that this implementation that we're working on, this is not about the tool. The tool is great, the tool is helpful, but again, we're working through that mindset shift of, we actually know that there's going to be some challenges with the way that we're rolling this out, because if you start to think about skills, skills are messy. You start working with, you think about all the thousands of skills, they're changing. I don't know if any of you have partnered with Lightcast, but we've done some analysis with skills with Lightcast, and you can get these big long lists of, here's the top skills for an market facing underwriter. And maybe there's 20 skills, but they're kind of messy, right? I mean, they're sort of apples and oranges, and some of them are really broad competencies and capabilities, and some of them are really finely tuned skills or experiences. And so I feel a little bit like they're just messy. And so we know that as employees look at this tool, that the tool itself, I don't think that it's going to be perfect. And so we wanted to pilot and really test out the theory that, look, knowing that this tool is a little, could muddy the waters for some people, can we, if we put an approach and a system around this, can we really create meaningful career development through illuminating career pathways for individuals? And so again, we're thinking about the whole system, not just the tool. And so the tool itself does allow the individual to sort of go into the tool, see the skills that are required in the role that they're in right now, assess themselves on those skills, and then work with their manager to determine, is this the right assessment? And then what happens is the tool actually provides them with some tangential career options, and they're able to look at their sort of spider diagram of skills if they were to be developing themselves for that job. So they can either look at their assessment in their current job or their desired job and identify skills that they might want to develop. And so I should have actually put a screenshot in here of that spider diagram, because it's really, really cool. And one of the things that we've been doing is we've been building a cadre of internal career coaches, which I'm just really excited about. We have 42 people that have stepped forward in the organization to volunteer their time to be a career coach. They're in the business units, and so they understand the jobs in those business units. And we've trained them. We've developed a coaching training program, and we piloted with a group of, I think, actually, I mixed up those numbers. We have 27 coaches, and we piloted it with a group of 42 career, sort of early career professionals and mid-career, maybe early to mid-career professionals, millennials. It was a group of millennials. And we got some fantastic results from that pilot. And so we understand, again, as we think about the system that we're trying to roll out and what the outcome is that we're trying to drive, it's not just about the tool, it's about the supports that you put in place too. And so I can actually, just from this career coaching pilot, roll out this broader system with a pretty good amount of confidence that we're going to get some meaningful career development just from these pilot results, which have been just fantastic. And then the tool will actually help the learner connect to targeted learning. And so that's one thing, but I think, we know that, okay, here's some LinkedIn learning, here's some Coursera learning. If you really want to drive deep learning experiences, you're not going to get that just from taking online learning by itself. And so that's where the rotation or the stretch role comes in. And with these two business units that we're piloting this in finance and IT, by the way, we're also working with those business units to identify a strategy and approach to posting rotational and stretch roles. And so we did roll out a talent marketplace like many companies during the pandemic. And I think, mixed results, because without an intention and a deliberate plan onto how you want to develop people and what skills you want to develop in people, those things can have problematic traction. Again, it depends on, the business, the situation. So looking at finance, looking at IT, and understanding, okay, some people from finance might actually go into an underwriting role or an actuarial role or vice versa. How do we create rotation or stretch opportunities to create the skills in the organization that we need to build and to create the pipelines for the roles that we need? And so, working within finance isn't going to be that helpful. We actually need to work across the business, but we're starting out looking at within finance. So that's the bulk of it. We understand too that career transition is an important part of this. How do we put mechanisms in place for supporting internal hiring? How do we have offboarding and onboarding so that as we move people through the organization, it's much smoother? So there's more work to be done, but right now we're just piloting and testing. So it's just the idea, and we're getting it out there and getting some traction around it. And I think it's just, again, we're taking this experimental, let's try it and let's see what we can learn from it. And it, again, less about the tool and more about the thinking. And by the way, huge mindset shift, right? Huge mindset shift to thinking about how are we building and hiring our internal talent. And so that's what we're trying to really focus on, is what's the mindset shift that we need to have to create this internal mobility and agility that we're trying to drive.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned mindset shift. I've done a lot of work on skills databases, talent mobility, upskilling, and that's one of the things that companies that have gone far down that path, that's one of their regrets, if they have any, is not focusing more on the mindset shifts that are needed earlier. Love the career coaching pilot results here shown on the right. Very impressive, even at the pilot stage. You mentioned a couple of tools, and we got Lightcast was the one used to identify skills. The other, you keep mentioning that, the platform or the tool people can go into. Is that a homebrew or is that a vendor that you're using for that?
Yeah, it's actually something we built internally. Our group technology office built it.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's really a nice tool.
Cool.
But yeah, there are tools out there, but
Yeah.
there's a lot going on in that space right now.
Absolutely.
I know we could have entire conversations about not only, skills, but also the platform and technology, but we're almost at the end of our time. And I really want to hear more about this incredible book that you, I'm sure, have poured your heart and soul into. So you wrote this about a year and a half ago. Tell us, just some key highlights from this book so we can go learn more.
Yeah, well, I wanted to, so I always, thought I would write a book, and over the last few years, I thought it would have something to do with learning. I didn't know it would be about learning, but I've just always been, as I said at the beginning of the call, interested in learning, particularly the intersection of learning and neuroscience and psychology, and I just think it's fascinating. And I started to realize that we think about learning as, how can we learn better or more, but we don't actually think about increasing our capability or capacity to learn. And so I had this idea that, really we think about learning more and less, and not about how do we increase our capacity to learn. So this focus was really on how do we leverage sort of the best of, or the newest cutting edge information neuroscience to increase our capacity to learn. And I think there's going to be a second edition because there's just so much coming out in the neuroscience journals right now over the last 20 years, since we've discovered that the adult brain still creates new stem cells. And the adult brain still continues to grow new neural pathways and things like that. We actually didn't know that until 1999. Adult stem cells were found in the brain in 1999 in the brains of like mice. So it wasn't even sure that they were in humans yet. But So it's been 20 years of neuroscience, and we barely have learned anything yet. So still tons to learn. But this is just, I think some ideas, and I call them learning hacks, and ideas to get into the mindset of learning. And apologies for that QR code. I'm not sure what happened, but you can search for this on Amazon. And please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out to me directly if you want to learn more about that, or just even talk about it more. Happy to connect with any of you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Teri. I've heard you speak on the content of the book, some of the highlights at a couple of conferences. It is definitely impressive. I think this QR code, I hope, is working. You had updated it for us, so
I thought I did.
I think it might be. But either way, Zeta put the link to your book on Amazon directly in the chat. Look, I want to just thank you again for sharing. You're getting a lot of kudos in the chat throughout the call, but as Diane said, this was great information and so inspirational how much you shared from all of your systematic programs today. Thank you, Bethany, for leading us on this path. Great conversation that we had with Teri today. Also want to remind everyone of our Next Practices Now conference. Again, this is now open for official registration next March 25th through the 28th in Scottsdale, Arizona. You can register now if you're already making travel plans for the new year. So again, thanks everyone for participating on the call today. Great conversation. And thanks again, Teri, for all that you shared. It really was a great time.